I get calls about home offices, pool houses, yoga studios, gyms, art studios, music studios. Some people even use them for housing. Guest rooms, guest houses, aging parents, boomeranging kids, forever homes, au pairs, nannies, caretakers, elder care, rental units, tiny houses sometimes. There's a bunch of different structures. You can build a new detached structure, like a whole house. You can build an addition to your primary house, like a bump out. You can convert a part of your primary house, like a garage conversion where the garage is attached to the house. You can convert a detached structure, like there's a barn or a detached garage, you convert it into an ADU. You can generally tear down and replace a structure, and it's pretty much the same rules as a conversion. And you can build manufactured housing, factory housing, or sometimes a tiny house. And that huge list of structures kind of demonstrates the versatility of accessory dwelling units. Because you can do so many different things with them, there's a lot of different ways to use them. I want to just rattle off the motives I see most commonly, and they overlap a lot with the uses that we'll talk about, so it's useful to have them in your head, yeah? People want more space for themselves and their family. People want multi-generational living. People want rental income. Sometimes it's a tax strategy or a form of legacy planning. Sometimes it's a real estate investment. You can add square footage to your most valuable asset and make it even more valuable. You can rehab unused space, that garage that's just sitting there as storage, or maybe not even storage. You could turn it into a bedroom, a kitchen, and a bathroom. The resident of that ADU might be a family member or somebody else who can provide child care, they can provide elder care, or they can provide any kind of caretaker service that that household needs. I speak to a lot of families who have a family member who's an adult, independent, and has some form of autism. And they want to explore the most independent living situation possible for that person while keeping a comfortable distance in case they want to provide some kind of care. And ADUs are a very good solution for that. ADUs can be a faster way to get permits and entitlements sometimes. You can sometimes use them to exceed local restrictions like floor area ratios or open space requirements. You can sometimes use them to negotiate with your homeowners association. And then I love the list of motivations that are like, yay, we're making the world better. You know, that's why I started this channel. I really believe in solving the housing shortage. I think ADUs are going to be a big piece of that. Not the whole thing, but a big old piece. And I think ADUs can be used to build our communities. They can reduce the housing shortage. They can create affordable, naturally affordable housing. They can reduce our impact on the environment because you end up living much closer to your job a lot of the time with an accessory dwelling unit. I'm not going to do a ton of this in the video, but there are whole chapters of this very good book by Cole Peterson, link in the video description, that talk about sort of the reasons that sociologists and city planners love ADUs, and that's very up my alley, but I won't bore you with the details. Now, let's get back to the many ways to use accessory dwelling units and what they can do for you. All right, so let's talk about some of these non-residential examples. Let's say you're building a home office. Many of us during the pandemic are working from home, homeschooling. We've all realized like, wow, it turns out I am loud when I'm filming these videos and talking on the phone. I did not know that about myself, but my cat and my wife have both let me know. And so a lot of people have been calling me about home offices. Can I use an ADU to build a home office? And the answer is yes, but you can definitely use an ADU as a home office, but there are advantages and disadvantages to this approach that kind of illustrate, and they're the same across most of the non-residential uses. ADUs have a kitchen and a bathroom, right? So a lot of the time people start off by saying, can I use an ADU to build a home office and I don't need a kitchen? And I'm like, yes, you can use an ADU, but you're going to have to build a kitchen or kitchenette in there. And so that instantly adds some costs to using this solution, right? The main advantage of using an accessory dwelling unit is it's a much more streamlined permit process sometimes. So you're exempt from a lot of local restrictions. For example, you might have a small lot and you've built up to the maximum that you can on that lot. The city can have a floor area ratio maximum. It can have an open space requirement. It might have minimum lot size requirements for new construction. And in all of those cases, local laws might prohibit you from building a large structure to use as a home office. Well, an ADU can circumvent some of those local restrictions as long as it's under 800 square feet and a certain distance from the property line. Additionally, I meet a lot of people who just don't like dealing with their planning commission, or their local homeowners association is very restrictive. ADUs can often get past those barriers because they're administrative permits. They're non-discretionary. The main disadvantages are related to how expensive ADUs can be. You know, you're building full-fledged housing according to the permit, and so you're going to need to put in a kitchen, a bathroom. You're going to need to meet Title 24 requirements for a home, a small residence, and so those can be really onerous depending on your lot, your location. The best course of action for these non-residential uses often depends on the client's specific situation. If all you're trying to do is a home office, right? Straight home office. Nobody's ever going to sleep there. You don't need a bathroom or kitchen. You could probably go to your planning department and find out what other kinds of structures you can build without a permit or with an administrative permit. And there's lots of solutions depending on your jurisdiction. You know, sometimes you might be able to build a small shed back there. You might be able to have it weatherproofed, and as long as it's like 120 square feet, maybe you don't need a permit, right? Maybe you can run electrical, or run it off of a generator, or run it off of solar panels. And you just have to find out if these permits are available to you, because you might be able to run a computer and a little mini split air conditioner, and you feel nice in a little shed, right? Maybe that's the best solution. And a lot of the time I speak to homeowners and they've heard about ADUs in the news, but they don't know that they're, small shed accessory structure permits. And so look up what permits are available to you, because you might have a cheaper solution. Now let's say you've gone to the planning department and there are no easy versions of this idea. There are no administrative permits you can get for a small structure with electricity, or there's going to be big onerous requirements to run the electrical, or to run to be off-grid, you need a big battery or something, whatever. If the costs start rising, or if the barriers start rising, then the ADU starts to become a more and more appealing approach. Anytime a client comes to me with a non-residential use, I kind of go through this shtick, and sometimes they say, well, hold on, I want a pool house. Actually, I'd love for it to have a bathroom so that while we're at the pool, we don't have to go all the way up to the house, which is on a completely different part of the property. Or while we're at the pool, we've got like a gas grill out there that we can use, and it's built in, and that could be sort of roughed in so that it's part of the ADU kitchen requirement, ? And that depends, but we could do stuff like that. And in their case, it wasn't that onerous to add a kitchen and a bathroom. It made a lot of sense for their project. In other cases, like the tiny home office use, like you don't need a full-fledged ADU sometimes, right? So that's a long, complicated way to boil it down. Hey, go look at what you could do with your planning department. Write down your goals and then see what tools are available. With non-residential spaces, sometimes ADUs are a great tool for you and sometimes they're not. So research. And if you don't want to research, call me. Another very common use for ADUs is a guest room or a guest house for people who tend to stay on a regular basis, often for more than a few days at a time. So people will call me and say, hey, Ryan, I want to create a guest room for my parents because they visit every year, and I would love to design it in a way that it could become a more permanent home if they ever wanted to move in more permanently. And it's an interesting use because it shows that accessory dwelling units sometimes create a good situation that's very versatile, very flexible, and it can allow us to approach difficult conversations about aging and independence and planning the future, which is a subject people don't always want to talk about. So if my client's goal is to have a fully independent guest house that their parents could live in one day, ADUs are a great use case, right? Because it's kind of a way to ease a very independent parent into the situation where they're like, actually, I quite like spending 6 months out of the year in this ADU. And then before you know it, it's a home. Because the ADU creates a fully functional guest house, right? It's got its own kitchen, it's got its own bathroom, it's super independent. Often it has its own entrance. It has separate utilities, so you could be on vacation and somebody's in the ADU. They can still manage, right? It's not like they need you to turn on the water or turn off the water or adjust the AC. The ADU is completely independent, and that's a big advantage for people who want to maintain independence. On the other hand, if somebody's talking about the space like a crash pad, like, well, we've got friends who come over for dinner and maybe we have a drink or two and they want to spend the night, like they don't need a kitchen when they wake up in the morning. Well, that's a great guest. They spend the night, they make you breakfast the next day. You might want to look up an addition to your house or converting the garage into a bedroom. And there's going to be disadvantages to that. For example, if you're converting a garage, the city might require you to replace the parking. Whereas with an accessory dwelling unit, you might probably get to circumvent that parking requirement, that parking replacement requirement. So I guess an example here, and not this isn't legal advice. I'm not your lawyer. But sometimes a client will come and they say, I've already got this accessory structure. Well, they never use the phrase accessory structure. A client will come and say, I've got this granny flat already. It was here when I bought the property. It's pretty cool. It's well built. I use it as a crash pad sometimes for friends who want to spend the night. And I was wondering if I could bring it up to code and rent it out if I got an ADU permit. And you kind of go through the detail of what they would probably have to go through. And that's, it could be a lot. You have to make sure it's up to Title 24 code for energy requirements. Often that'll involve, let's say it's completely finished, like this house, there's drywall and stuff. You might have to take down that drywall, expose the walls, the studs, and show what's behind there. You might then have to add insulation. You might have to add so much insulation that you've got to reinforce the studs with 2x6s so that you can stick in more insulation. And at that point, now you're hiring a framer, you're hiring an insulation team, a drywall guy, a finisher. It's like, it's suddenly become a big old project to make it Title 24 compliant, when actually you had a structure that you already felt pretty good about. But sometimes when I walk a client through what might be involved in bringing a unit up to code, they decide to hit pause. And that's because they don't plan on renting it out. They don't plan on having somebody stay there more than one night in a row, right? And you just think about a space a little bit differently. All right, and this one I love. Talking about accessory dwelling units as forever homes. I talk to a lot of people who are coming to a point in life where the house that they've been living in for 20, 30 years is no longer the perfect house for them. Easy example is there's 3 empty bedrooms because they used to have 3 kids living in the house, and those kids have all grown up and have families of their own now. Another example is up in the hills in the East Bay, for example. You've got houses built on 3 floors, and the only floor that's easy to access is often the garage. So you drive into the garage, which is on grade, and then you need to climb upstairs to get any part of the house. But they're built on 3 floors, they're beautiful houses, epic views, but it is exhausting to go. Sometimes you gotta go upstairs and downstairs just to get to another flat. It's all on one level, but there's like a intermediary thing. It's like the Winchester Mansion. And stairs are a pain in the butt, even for young families. But as you get older, you start to think, man, I'm not using most of my house, or some parts of my house are exhausting to use. And for some people, they become dangers too. I met somebody who said, yeah, when I bought this house, the sunken living room was really groovy. I don't really want a groovy living room anymore. I want a flat living room. So I think there's a lot of different things in your house that might serve you well in one time period and not serve you as well in another time period. And I talk to a lot of clients about how they might use an accessory dwelling unit to build a forever home, to recapture parts of their home that they don't currently use, like that garage that's on grade. Wouldn't it be nice if that were the apartment? Or building a new forever home on another part of the property. and renting out the primary to a family that doesn't mind the multiple levels. And this is what ADUs I think are great at, because what they do is they take a property with only one house, and that one house is relatively inflexible, and they turn it into a property with two homes. And the homes can serve different purposes at different times. So like the big house was a great house for this person to grow up in and live in for 30 years. And now they get to move into a small forever home in the backyard for them, and it's a delight to them, and they get to use it all, and it's not fatiguing because it's designed for them. And in the meantime, they're renting out the big house to a young family, or bringing their adult kids back into the house because now those kids need a bigger house, and it's perfect. Lodging for a caretaker or a nanny, this is another great use for an ADU. This can range from somebody living on the property full-time to a residence for part-time caretakers or travel nurses. I personally see more examples working with a full-time caretaker, often a family member. With the ever-increasing cost of child care, elder care, and care, housing for caretakers, it creates a really clever, positive feedback loop. It's a virtuous circle, right? One of the biggest costs in life is housing, and especially in California. And if you have housing provided for you as part of your labor, then the labor becomes less expensive, right? And everybody benefits from this really close proximity. And so if you're investigating childcare, elder care, caretaking as one of the uses for an ADU, this is a slam dunk use. And again, like so many of the other uses, you can cycle through multiple phases over the decades. And so what is today an apartment for a travel nurse becomes one day the place that the eldest member of the family gets to move into, and they become caretakers for the grandchildren. And then one day those grandkids might grow up and be sort of independent adult teenagers who live in there, or boomeranging kids who come back from college and need a starter home. And you kind of cycle through all these different uses, and that's really positive stuff. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about rental income, because one of the big advantages to accessory dwelling units is that you can rent them out. And so they're fully independent homes that you can rent out. So if for every client I talk to today who is currently planning on using the ADU for themselves or for a family member, they always say, and it's nice to know we could rent it one day. I think everybody knows that they're building that option in for themselves in the distant future, and that flexibility of use is very helpful. Also, you can use it to rent today. One of our clients just finished an ADU in Oakland, and 737 square foot ADU, and within a couple weeks of putting it on the market was renting it out for over $3,000 a month. And so these things turn into rental right away if you want them to. And she's planning on moving in much later down the road. She's built the ADU and designed it for herself one day, but in the meantime plans on renting it out. Another great use, right? Shows that you cycle through these uses. An important caveat about rentals, though. Everybody always asks me, can I put this on Airbnb? The state law is crafted so that you should not rent these out for less than 30 days at a time. So no short-term vacation rentals, Airbnb, Vrbo, it's not supposed to be rented for less than 30 days at a time. And the way that's enforced, I've seen some jurisdictions make you sign a covenant or deed restriction that says you won't use it for short-term vacation rentals. Some jurisdictions don't ask for that. I see a lot of Airbnb listings that are accessory dwelling units, so I know that people are ignoring that rule sometimes. But strictly speaking, these are not supposed to be rented out for shorter than 30-day rental terms, and you should know that before you go the ADU route. Tiny homes on wheels, sometimes. The reason I included this is, everybody asks me about tiny houses, and the topic that I'm talking about is everything ADUs can do for you. And in some jurisdictions, you can get a tiny house on your property and get a permit for it, and it counts as an ADU in those jurisdictions. And so in Fresno, Los Angeles, Santa Clara, San Diego, SLO and San Jose. You can build movable tiny homes or tiny houses. I say build, install movable tiny homes or tiny houses on wheels according to the very specific rules within their ADU ordinance. I should also admit, like almost everything I've talked about in the video other than tiny homes, I have clients who have literally built those ADUs to use for those other uses. And I do not yet have a client who has installed a tiny house with an ADU permit. So this is much more theoretical to me, and I'm still learning, like all of us. And so if you are trying to do a tiny house, I'd be very interested in helping you, because this is a very cool solution to the housing shortage, and I know less about it. And so contact me. I want to learn from your experience. Usually these count toward the maximum number of ADUs you can have, which is also important to know. And you just check the rules for your city. If you want to know more, check out videos by the Latch Collective. They're really good, and they'll talk about the rules in those cities, and also they'll talk about ways that you can talk to your city government about also adopting tiny house rules. Tiny houses are very different from ADUs in my mind, because they're not as permanent. By being on less permanent foundations, and they're manufactured, and so they don't accrue value the same way homes do. They often become depreciating assets. But I'm not giving financial advice. I'm listing everything that ADUs can do for you. And a thing that you can do in some places is install a tiny house using an ADU permit. So I've said it, and I will make more videos about tiny homes in the future. Having said all of these different uses, you need to know where to start. And it's a bit of an iterative process where you're gonna need to line up financing, permits, and design and construction all at the same time. And you kind of go from one to the other and back to the one, and you gotta iterate through it multiple times. And this is a video about doing that. And if you wanna binge watch the best content about all of these different uses and ADUs and housing, check this out. We're tackling the housing shortage in California, and we're doing it by helping people like you build accessory dwelling units, and I hope this has been super helpful.